Yeah, we are streaming live. Aloha no gang. Aloha, good evening, everybody. It's Aloha Saturday.
What's up? What's up, guys?
Yeah, with Mel and Charlie.
How's everybody doing tonight? I hope you guys doing good. My iPad is telling me that it wants to update, but it ain't gonna update now. Nope, nope, nope. Anyway, hope you guys had a great day. What a nice and cool day today. I like really
Yeah.
cool. It was nice in Wailua. It was super nice. Um, Hopefully it stays. Had a couple of showers throughout the day, but
Mhm.
overall was nice and comfortable, which is always good. How about you guys out there, Charlie? Looks like a Christmas tree in the back of your body.
Yes, yes, it is. It's a Christmassy feeling, It's my wife wanted to do something to cheer us up this year because the children are not here. They're not on the same island, so and we miss all of our kids. So this is our way of just kind of treating ourselves to a happy holiday season, even though COVID is upon us, but trying to keep a positive attitude. That's what it's all about.
Yes, it is. And I think tomorrow Patsy's gonna put up our tree. We get this gigantic tree that I think it's probably about 2.5, 3 feet tall.
Oh, must be about 9 feet wide if it's really gigantuous.
Was that maybe? Yeah, it's 3 feet. No, 3 feet, 3 feet. And then every year when Paul, you put them back in a box, and then the next year you take them out of the box and you put them back up again and plug them in. It's all self-contained, just so that we
Oh,
get some sense of Christmas. Because like you, Charlie, our kids obviously are not here, and it sucks because you cannot really. This gonna be the first Christmas we haven't been with them for a while. So
yeah.
I mean, forever actually. So yeah, it's hopefully the tree will bring something. Uh, Let me see. Hang on there. Let me share this thing real quick.
I'm sure. I'm sure it will. It'll bring back a lot of good memories,
Did
right?
you share it, Patsy? Oh, can you, please? Okay. Well, tonight we got a special guest tonight, a first timer on the show, which is always cool when we get new people to come on. But and he'll be on in a few minutes, and it's our managing director, Mike Dahilig. He's going to talk a little bit about the county's decision to move forward with the quarantine. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts, and I know there's a lot of frustrated and angry people, and there's a lot of people that are very excited. But I think I asked Charlie to reach out to Mike because we wanted to hear from them, from the administration on what occurred, what led up to this. I know a lot of people are saying we should have just went and do the test, the mandatory test. Absolutely, everybody agrees with that, including the mayor, but we couldn't because of the governor's rejection. So anyway, we'll let Mike talk a little bit about that. On Monday, just so that you guys know, Monday our Facebook Live with Mel and Charlie will be at 5 p.m. We were asked by the Kauai doctors to host a press conference with the media, with the Kauai doctors, Dr. Evslin, Dr. Behrman, our district health officer, Dr. Kapono Chong Hansen, and of course, Dr. Dara O'Carroll. So we are going to be moderating that press conference for the media, and that will be at 5 o'clock. So we won't be on at 7.
Hmm.
So I will be posting something up tonight, and we'll be running it throughout tomorrow and Monday. But Monday, 5 p.m., put that in your calendars because we won't be on at 7, okay? And we will be streaming that live to Facebook, so it'll be no different. But we're going to have the media asking questions of our 4 doctors so we can get a better understanding of the scientific and medical reasons why something needed to be done. So please, if you can, and share it with everyone. Once I post it up, do me a favor and share it. Share it. Let's get a good viewership going on that.
Hey, I wanted to really touch on tonight's discussion. I know there's good and bad. and decisions are never easy. But a very large destination location, a large group will go to Australia every year. And I was just reading this post sent in by a good friend from. They took the post off the Australian embassy or the U.S. embassy. No, I'm sorry, the Australian embassy. And Australia right now has all travelers entering Australia from overseas will be quarantined in a hotel designated facility for 14 days. So, they are designated to go to a facility, and they have not seen a dramatic drop in their travel, but they're very cautious. And as you know, Mel, Hawaii, California is one of the largest markets for travel to Hawaii from California, and they're on the verge of shutting down for I forget how many weeks or how many cycles, but nonetheless, they're taking some drastic measures. And I think tonight when we get to talk to Mike, he'll let us know what our mayor is trying to prevent, the direction he wants to prevent going into. So I think it's going to be something worthwhile. Something worthwhile.
Yeah, I think at some point you gotta take some sort of action, and I know there's a lot of people talking about the numbers are low on Kauai, but you got to remember Kauai, based on our population, when you look at the ratios, we're no different than the other islands. It's just that we have a much smaller population. The
Hmm.
concern is if you heard Dr. O'Carroll's uh, explanation, the concern is the amount of passengers that are coming through undetected based on the numbers that we've seen already on Kauai. So that is the problem. And I think that's what triggered the request from the mayor, because we don't want to wait until it's too late.
Yes.
And we had another two more cases today, one resident, one visitor, both travel related again, and I don't know when I listen to the lieutenant governor, he constantly says that the vast majority of cases are from residents. Where is he getting that from? I don't know. You see, the only evidence, documented evidence and data that we have that we know is accurate is from Kauai, and that's the numbers that were used. So I don't understand why they insist on continuing to say those falsehoods, because that's what they are. If you're gonna cite data, you're gonna cite statistics, then use accurate data, and that's what they cannot do. Do it for Maui, do it with Hawaii, the Big Island, do it with Oahu, do it separately, and then do a comparison of all the different counties. But don't just continuously use the Big Island's arrival testing in the mix and use that as your the basis for your estimates. So
You know,
anyway,
if he's gonna do that, you might as well use the arrival from Koholave if he wants to state his case.
yeah, seriously.
You
But
might as
that's
well do
kind of
that.
that's the same thing, right?
Yep. Yep.
Well, I know this must be killing Mike Dahilig because he's a staunch UH fan, and tonight UH is playing Nevada, and Nevada is undefeated, and so we don't want to take up too much of Mike's time because I know he's got front row seats at the game tonight.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, how's it?
Oh, you sound perfect, man. Look
Oh,
good.
it's not like one like a studio,
Yeah.
like
Professional.
FM stereo.
I think it's laminate flooring, right? These things always bounce off.
No, it sounds good though.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does, man. It really does. Sounds like a Bose system, Bose. Yeah, that's what it really
Yeah.
sounds like.
Anyway, I'd like to say, first of all, thank you so much for joining us, Mike. I know it's we wanted to start you right at 7 because there's a lot of people on, in fact, right now,
Oh,
listening in, because we kind of want to talk about what has transpired since the announcement of the 14-day quarantine. So if you wouldn't mind, walking us back then and bring us up to where we are now, and part of the mindset of why we had to go this route. Would you be able to do that, Mike?
I think the primary goal that Mayor Kawakami has tried to achieve has been this balance between trying to get to a point where we're able to have low prevalence of disease, but be able to have an economy that's functioning. And going back to when Safe Travels was on the board, and this was going back to September, the mayor felt, based off of medical advice that he had received, as well as looking at the Safe Travels program as it was being developed, that a second test with a short mandatory quarantine was the appropriate balance to be able to have that manage between prevalence of disease on island and be able to have sectors of our economy function. And the this goes back all the way to March and April, where we have been trying very hard to support the mayor in his objective to not go back to another lockdown. And I think we all, it seems like it was that long ago, but we don't want to have lines at Costco again where only 100 people are back in there. We don't want to have in restaurant dining. And so that's why he had always proposed this second test protocol, because in his mind he said, look, if people want to come to Kauai, 3 days is not a heavy burden to stay in quarantine and take a $150 test. He feels that the health and the citizenry of the island is worth that level of protection. But it is something that over the past 2 months has been a point of disagreement between the governor and the mayor. And it's not a bad disagreement. It's just a philosophical disagreement where the governor feels one test as being burdened on the cost of travel for a traveler is enough. The mayor wants the traveler to pay for two. The governor feels that if they're taking a test and they're coming over here, they shouldn't have to be in quarantine anymore. The mayor believes that there should be, at least for Kauai, three days. And so that's where the preference still lies. We still haven't given up hope yet that we can work out something with that. But it's why you've seen the mayor send up the rule twice, not once, but twice, asking for the same thing, pretty much saying, hey, we believe this is a fair balance given what our rural healthcare system does provide. We don't want to overburden it, and the healthcare system should be the last line of defense. The first line of defense should be prevention and handling it that way, and then monitoring afterwards. Not putting our healthcare workers on the front lines. They should be the ones that we are preserving for the situation where this really does get to a point where it's out of control. So that's what happened over the past couple of weeks. Was we've seen the numbers trend up, and the question that was asked in the EOC over day after day after day, what interventions would be available to be able to flatten that trend or bring that trend down? And we were left with pretty much, again, two options. Do we ask for the second test, mandatory quarantine? And do we also say, hey, we have a problem with people coming in that don't have the test results in hand and they come in positive? And that became problematic for us from a statistics standpoint. And that's why we rely on our own district health office to report the statistics. Because if you take a test in Los Angeles and you fly to Kauai, you don't have the test in hand, but then you get the test results from Los Angeles, you're +1 in Los Angeles, not +1 on Kauai. And that really doesn't speak to the data's veracity when you're trying to observe how much disease you have on island. And so that's why, in seeing that trend go up and up and up, that question of, okay, well, what do we do? Do we know that we're going to have anything in hand that's going to be able to tamper it down? Or is there something else that we can do? And so we asked again for that second test regimen with the 3-day mandatory quarantine. And we were left with I guess a negative response from the governor. And so that's why at that point, the mayor said, well, what else do we have in the toolbox to try to get a handle of this? Because I think Lanai is in the back of everybody's minds. They're similar to us, a rural community, very tight knit, but you saw, 100 cases pop up in 4 days on that island. And it just shows that it only takes one thing to seed to get in there. And every day we've been seeding the island with disease at the rate that we're getting uncomfortable with. And so that's where I think he was left with that decision where he said, look, okay, well, we know we're only going up. If there's nothing else that's going to be able to bring us down, then we've got to essentially pick this option. And that's where we arrived at with what we did.
You know what is interesting, Mike? When the mayor sent over the second request for the mandatory quarantine second test, when he sent over that request, and I don't remember dates, but I guess it was probably what, a week, 2 weeks ago,
Yeah.
when we started to see the surges, and he tried again. And I guess it was about a week or less than a week after that was sent in, I saw the governor on a press conference, and in the media, one of the reporters asked him, are you inclined to support Mayor Kawakami's request to have the mandatory test after a 3-day quarantine? And he said that he was not going to support anything that would add more restrictions to the visitors. But if you look at 3-day quarantine, 1 second test, a mandatory test, and then you look at 14 days straight quarantine, no option for testing or anything, it seems like the more inconvenience would be the quarantine versus a 3-day quarantine and a second test. So I'm a little confused as to why the governor is holding strong on his opposition to the 3-day. And many of the experts, even the experts, don't believe a 3-day quarantine is sufficient. But considering what we have now, the 3-day would definitely be an improvement. But he's not even going for that. The governor is not going for that, and obviously putting the mayor in a position where, when you look at our numbers, and I like the way you put it, the seeding of the virus, because that's exactly what's happening. Mm-hmm. There comes a point where you're not going to be able to hold back, or you're not going to be able to slow the virus down, and then we'll be at the point of capacity at our hospital. So why wouldn't the governor just approve a 3-day quarantine with a test? Well, what was the reasons that he may have alluded to, other than, I don't want to inconvenience the travelers, because what he just approved is an inconvenience.
It's still a question for us, Mel, to be honest. I mean, we, from a logic standpoint and the roundtable discussions we've had with experts and our first responders, we felt there was a balance. The governor just has a difference of opinion on it. And, I wish that we had more tools in our toolbox to be able to order restrictions on travel, or, give the mayor the ability to say, hey, I can order quarantine, but that is a power that is reserved strictly for the governor and the governor alone. And so that's where all we can do is ask. And we were at that juncture where we were scratching our heads, because when you look at Honolulu County, they're looking at a post-test regimen. When you look at Maui County, they're looking at a post-test regimen. Harry had a post-test, but that was on arrival, and we didn't feel that was enough time to account for the exposure of somebody that was between testing on pre-travel and the journey that person has to take. And even the lieutenant governor has come on and said, post-testing, should be accommodated. But, if we looked at seriously, if we were to meet the governor's wishes and actually absorb the cost of the test, and the reality in terms of being able to absorb the cost of the test and our ability to actually get, high volume, low cost testing kits, even with that in hand, we estimated to be between $3 to $5 million a month we would have to pay for at the volume of travelers that were coming into Honolulu Airport. Lihue Airport. So that was not sustainable for us. And even more so, I think the mayor, when he saw those figures in a deliberation internally, was saying, hey, why doesn't the traveler absorb this cost, because they are choosing to travel during a pandemic? This should be folded into the overall cost of an experience for them, because they are getting to benefit off of taking the risk at the risk of our county public. So It's not as if we didn't or dismissed the idea of trying to figure out how to absorb the cost of the test, but it just was not sustainable given our ability to financially pay for those things.
Mike, let me ask you, you mentioned about some of the logic or lack of thereof from the governor's end. And it seems pretty obvious, uh, given the past decisions he's made on other matters. Do you think there is there is a meeting of the minds that match up, or there's a total disconnect between the governor and the lieutenant governor when they put forth a decision that's made? Because a lot of times the governor will come across, but there seems like there's a hint of the lieutenant governor's thoughts in that process. Do you agree or disagree with that?
I mean, it's been very apparent that the lieutenant governor has his own perspectives, and he likes to state his disagreement. I think that when you look at the pattern of agreement and disagreement between the lieutenant governor and the governor, sometimes you try to wonder how these discussions up on the fifth floor of the Capitol are actually being conducted. But he's part of the governor's team, and but he's also an independent official. So um, ultimately, at the end of the day, we look at who's signing the paper and who has pen to paper, and it's the governor. We need his approval on anything. So that is quarantine related. So while we do look at what the LG has to say, we always have to scrutinize and look at his evaluation, and ask our local experts whether or not either the statistics, the theory, or the approach is in line with what is best for our island. And sometimes it is, sometimes it's not, and that independent analysis simply has to be conducted. The LG does not speak for the healthcare for the island, and that's why we take it into account, but we don't necessarily just take it point for point as sacrosanct, I guess.
Okay.
Interestingly, and I have a couple of questions from viewers, but I did want to ask you, in the lieutenant governor's interview with the Star Advertiser the other day, he only had good things to say about Mayor Kawakami. It's pretty obvious that he has the battle for governor of next in 2 years has started between Josh Green and Caldwell. Mayor Caldwell from Honolulu is so obvious. And although the lieutenant governor states that, I don't want to make this political, but, and then he goes into really criticizing Mayor Caldwell, but having only good things to say about Mayor Kawakami, rightfully so. But it's interesting, that dynamic. He says very nice things about Mayor Kim for Mayor Kim's performance with the post-arrival testing, which was, again, that was, the governor approved that because there was no quarantine attached to it. It was just a test that was being done without a quarantine. So, I think there's that component of the political component, which it is what it is. There's no way around that. That's going to happen. The two guys are obviously in competition. The first question from the viewer is, what exactly does opting out, or the opt out where we're at right now, mean for inter island passengers or travelers?
Right. So opting out essentially means that we snap back to the way things were handled for travel prior to October 15th. So, opting out is not a lockdown. It's not a shutdown. It does interrupt business for a huge portion of our island. And I think that weighs on the mayor's mind, it's particularly with those that are relying on our tourism and visitor sector. But it is not a shutdown. And so if you're traveling inter-island, the same rules would apply prior to that were in place prior to October 15th. That would now happen on December 1st, where if you do want to come from any of the other islands, you have to quarantine for 14 days, unless you are in a situation where you are a critical infrastructure worker, which is defined by the governor's proclamation. And then there are certain, exemptions that by county authority we provide based on the governor's proclamation. So, for example, same-day medical travel. We don't want folks on Kauai thinking that they cannot go to their specialist or get things done on Oahu that need to be taken care of to make sure that the other side of their health is actually, maintained. So we provide same day for those. In certain situations where there's federal types of services that are needed or jury duty, that's also things that we take care of as same day exemptions. But for the most part, rule of thumb is if it's something that you can show that it's just for a same day trip to a neighbor island to take care of your needs and come right back, then that's how we typically through our Kauai.gov/COVID-19 portal. We'll have our staff provide exemptions coming in, and so it's essentially a snapback. We've been in this situation. We've had these procedures before. It's the same stuff that was in place before October 15th, and that is what the opting out decision by the governor, as requested by the mayor, leads to.
So the modified travel exemption program is still available.
Yes.
Got it. Thank you.
So with this opt-out, no longer pretest is no longer needed, correct?
Yes, there is no pretest option at this point.
Okay. And then as far as rental cars, that's out of window for anyone on quarantine, correct?
Yeah, so it goes back to that governor's order where if you are subject to quarantine, you cannot get a car.
Now, as far as the county is concerned, I know Kauai County was the only one that prohibited the quarantine at TVRs. That's basically.
Yeah, we know we're the only county that was very hawkish on that particular type of enforcement, because we know that there needs to be eyes on people that are subject to long-term quarantine. So we've gone through these exercises before. We don't anticipate that there's going to be a need to rewrite the book with some of these things, because we've implemented it before. So things like the Mahalo Green Card again for those that are critical workers or people that need rental cars, those things will likely come back in some form or fashion, right? So we don't anticipate that there's going to be much need to reinvent the wheel coming into December 2nd.
So nothing as far as the vacation rentals, condos that originally was not allowed for people that were subject to quarantine. Is that still the same?
Still the same.
So okay, so just hotels.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the other question was benchmarks. Now, it's temporary, but at what point, when does the quarantine go away, or what type of benchmarks or triggers?
Reevaluation.
Right.
Yeah, at what point does the county reevaluate, I guess is the right word, and say, okay, we can go back? Are there any thoughts on that?
So, taking one step back, Mel, to how we had coupled the opt-out scenario with the tier system. At the time, the tier system was actually fully developed, and it was in the process of actually being requested to be implemented by rule. And during that first discussion before Safe Travels was going to be implemented back in October, and the mayor had gotten into, again, the disagreement with the governor concerning the second test protocol, that at I guess 3 days before, there was this opt-out proposal that was allowed by the governor. Again, this is something that the governor had offered each county mayor to opt out, and we were not clear as to how to integrate or create a benchmark for that particular type of offer by the governor, because in fact the offer wasn't even in writing. It was stated at a meeting, and we were trying to figure out, okay, well, how do we handle opt out? So that's where at the time we had looked at tier 2, but at 7 days instead of 14 days prevalence as a way to handle it. But the reality and why we snapped into the opting out phase was because 80% of our cases had shown they're travel related, after a doubling of the cases in 5 weeks compared to 7.5 months before. And so the question, at the time to actually take the opting out phase, do we hang on for 14 days when we know that we're hitting 5-day spikes already? Or do we know already we're going to hit there if we're not going to do any other types of interventions? So because of the implementation date of December 2nd, the mayor has always taken the position that a 2 incubation period type of evaluation always needed anytime we make these hard implementation changes in the way that we are handling the virus. And so the likelihood is we'd be looking at 2 incubation periods for reevaluation, and then seeing where that prevalence is on the island. But also we need to keep in mind that the prevalence of disease in our major tourist markets that come into Kauai also need to be looked at. So Los Angeles, San Jose, San Diego, San Francisco, even Anchorage, all of these cities in the past 2 to 3 days have announced lockdowns, full-on lockdowns. And so if their disease prevalence is high, but we've been able to bring ours down in 28 days, I mean, that's one of the evaluation points that we have to look at is, okay, well, if we open up again with pre-testing, are we just going to be allowing people from high prevalence markets to come into Kauai again? Are we back in the same situation? So we hope that, our large markets that are on the mainland are able to get a handle on the disease, but, with disease at 3, 4 to 5 times the rate it was even during the second surge, leaves to wonder whether or not by simply reinstating travel, we would be having people with high probability of coming in with disease would be back in that same situation again into incubation period. So we'll look locally. We'll take a look at it from a 2 incubation period, but we also got to look at other factors like that as well.
Thank you.
Okay, so say for instance, you go through your, let's say we speculate and you go to the 2 cycle period. So that's still about 28 days. So if it goes into effect on the 2nd, and so you're basically running out the month of December, say things looks pretty darn good. If you revert back to the safe travels, which means pre-test, do you think you still have to have some kind of protection on the back end after they arrive? Do you think of going in and asking again for a mini quarantine of 3 to 4 days with a second test or a second test? Because right now, even as it stands, a second test, as I know it, it's all voluntary. There is no mandatory second test, right? So that's why the percentages were quite low of participation. I think with the returning residents, it was probably higher because they know they have a vested interest in Kauai. But as far as the traveler is concerned, knowing that if they should pop a positive, they're when their vacation because they can't do nothing, right? They got a quarantine, they can't even jump on a plane. So what do you think? What do you think you'll be asking for if you come off that 2 cycles? Do you think you probably have to ask for some kind of safeguard? I mean, I think you would.
I think what you're mentioning, Charlie, is actually the type of things that we do need to already start planning for. To be candid, we're in some ways trying to still worry about what's going to happen on the 2nd, right? But
right.
It is, you do bring up a good point where that's what we got to look at, right? Are we getting ourselves back in the same situation again? Because the opting in, opting out does not help those that are trying to plan, especially if it's economically related, and it's not, it's not good to do that. Opting in, opting out, opting in, opting out. So, those are things that I think the mayor is still going to press on. If I were a betting man, but in terms of actual details, or how that remains to be seen is another question. So we do have some time to think about it, but I know for a fact that the mayor's philosophy concerning the second test and 3-day quarantine with mandatory testing is still his preferred option.
Yeah, thank you.
I know, Mike, I know we don't have you for much longer, so I just want to, I think what's going to happen is a lot of travelers will be diverted. I think a lot of people will change their plans and go to the other islands that they don't have to quarantine, they can get by. I mean, I think the whole testing thing now is difficult because we're losing trusted partners, and it's the ability to provide a negative test result or a test result before departure is getting to be very difficult. But I think what we'll see is it's obvious that we'll see a decrease in cases on Kauai, and then we could gauge what's happening in the other counties that are not at a full quarantine, and we'll be able to tell definitely if in fact it's working or not. But I know because I see some people asking about, they want to know what you guys will be looking for. It's very difficult to point that out right now because we're not doing the same thing as Honolulu and Maui and the Big Island. So everybody's doing different things, which is where I think I wish the governor would have come out with a standardized policy or protocol for all the counties. Or, and this is my question, Mike, I don't know, and you're a lawyer as well, why can't the mayors, I know the governor came out with the rule after Maui basically disregarded the governor's rule about the beaches on Maui. I remember Mayor Victorino came out and said, we're not going to enforce that. No, we're going to let our people. And then the governor came out with the directive that said, from now on, all the mayors got to get permission from Papa before you do what you want to do. But where is that power? Where is that authority? Is it in the Constitution? Is it in the state law? Where is it that the governor can direct a mayor or prohibit a mayor from doing anything that affects just their county? That's what I'm confused with.
It's enumerated in HRS 127A. That is the emergency power statute. And how it interfaces with home rule has always kind of been a question because 127A is actually a relatively new statute. Prior to 127A, the mayors actually didn't really have much home rule power during emergency. So the mayor has an independent emergency proclamation power with certain powers, and then the governor has certain emergency power proclamation types of things as well. And the first time it was really kind of tested was actually the 2018 flood on Kauai in terms of what kind of tools that thing had. This time around, with the governor actually preempting a section of the statute, there's not really much case law or there's not much precedent to say whether or not the governor is correct in doing that. I know that internally we've asked, can he do this? But if we were to end up with a protracted legal battle about this, or put ourselves in a position where we don't just work with the tools we have versus trying to understand what are the governor's powers or not in being able to preempt, it just didn't seem like that was where we wanted to focus a lot of our energy. But it is a question. I concede that. And
yeah, and Mike, I'm not suggesting that we do that because I think that could be counterproductive. I'm just saying, I was just trying to look up. I did look up the statute, and I couldn't find anything where, wow, where did this power come from? And I understand what he's trying to do.
Yeah.
But at some point, I think like the governors in the mainland, the cities and counties, they basically do their own thing, and it's different over here. So anyway, I just wanted to pop that in. Sorry for putting you on the spot, bro.
No. I mean, it's
unscripted, unrehearsed. It's always a trip when you come on this show.
Hey, Mike,
He's not gonna come back now.
No.
One last question before you go. It's halftime and UH leads Nevada 10-7, just to let you know. Okay.
Oh.
Yeah. Who determines when that emergency rule sunsets? Because it seems like everything floats around an emergency, but who actually comes in and say, hey, the emergency no longer exists, or what? I've heard talk about the 60-day rule where you do an emergency proclamation for when there's an emergency for 60 days, and I presume because we have gone way beyond that under the governor's proclamation, he probably suspended that rule as well, the 60 days. So I'm just wondering, at what level or who has that power to determine, we've kind of reached the threshold and it's gone below the threshold. Therefore, the emergency no longer exists. Who does that?
It is the governor's power and the governor's power alone. I mean, it is a pretty extraordinary power, but it's given to him by legislation, and so that 60-day trigger really is something that comes out of statute. Prior to 127A, there was no actual timeline on how long a disaster was going to be allowed to be declared. So just kind of one fast digression. After the Coloco flooding, there was a proclamation that I believe at the time of the governor, I believe it was probably Lingle or somebody had actually declared, and that thing was still open 7 or 8 years later. So there was never a closeout under the old statute, and so that proclamation exists. And I think the problem, and again, I'm just speculating, but is that when a proclamation exists, it waives all kinds of laws like procurement and HR and all these different things, and in the name of expediency, and that's why I think the state legislature put a 60-day a statute of limitations or a timeline on when the governor or even the mayor in a separate situation can declare these extraordinary situations and exercise extraordinary power, because they don't want that thing running in perpetuity. And there's examples in the past where that has run in very long perpetuity and has led to, in certain situations, abuse of executive power and by being able to waive off a statute. So there's a balance there. I think people ask that as why is that? Even with the council, for example, the council has emergency powers in charter that allows for 60 days for an emergency ordinance to run with a supermajority vote of the council. So that 60-day standard is not unusual. It's found in a lot of other places throughout county and state laws. So that's probably why you see this constant renewing and renewing and renewing.
Okay. Thank you, my friend.
Right on, man. I know you got to run, man. I appreciate you stopping by. Last minute notice.
Not a
Appreciate
problem.
you.
The way Shivan was passing earlier, I don't know. So I just.
Well,
I'm
sure
say that
you're
for
gonna get the second half of the game. Hopefully, UH can pull it off.
Especially with the bat at 5-0. So
And that's what I'm shocked that they're up. I really am. And
Yeah.
But good. They need to win. They need to win. And I'm looks like Tyson and Jones fought to a draw.
Really?
That's what I'm reading right here. Live updates. Tyson scored 76, Jones 76. Tyson said he's good with the draw. Jones says he's never satisfied with a draw, but said Tyson is strong and everything he hit hurt. So.
Yeah, but this was a different part of the rules for this fight. The fight was the first time in boxing history that both fighters had to wear ear cups just to be safe. So.
Okay.
I don't know if that's a COVID thing but that's.
I don't know. I think Charlie. Sometimes I swear he get COVID fog. I think it's contagious.
Wow.
Anyway, bro, thank you very much. Stay
Thank
safe,
you.
Mike, and we will be in touch. I know there's a lot of questions, and maybe we'll get you guys off, get you guys back on later this week. Monday, Mike, we have that press conference with the doctors, the Kauai doctors that'll be on. I did share with Sarah, but it's at 5 o'clock, so
Okay.
should be interesting. Should be interesting discussion.
Well, I'm looking forward to that one.
Okay, my friend. Take care.
Okay. All right.
Aloha.
Have a great evening.
Appreciate it.
Well, I hope some of you got your questions answered. I know some of you are. You just get so many. We only had limited time with Mike tonight, but we'll try to get him back on maybe later this week or get the mayor on. So again, he's reiterating that the mayor's preference would be a second test after a short quarantine. I know there's a lot of you that, including myself, the 3-day may seem a little short, but compared to what we have now, it's definitely an improvement. We'll see what happens. I am going to be shocked if the governor allows the Maui mayor, Mayor Victorino, because the mayor has requested a secondary test after a quarantine. I'm dying to see what the governor does. Uh,
Mandatory testing.
yeah, mandatory testing after a short mandatory quarantine. I will be shocked to see what the governor does. And if the governor approves Maui's request, then we know then it's probably personal. It's
Yep.
probably political, and that
Yep.
it would be a shame. That would be a shame. So we got to wait and see. But what I heard from Mike tonight was that in their internal discussions, it's always been the preference of the mayor to go with a second test option, and that was just not available. So this was the only other option. And I know a lot of people disagree, but what other option do you have? Considering every day we're putting more people with the virus in our community. Interesting.
Well, I think it's worth saying this, that I appreciate having um, Mike on tonight, because some people may or may not know who he is, but I have to say this: he is a Punahou grad. He's very bright. I went to Kamehameha, so but I'll concede to the fact that he's a very bright individual, and he's been in the thick of things, and he's been on the advisory committee for the mayor, along with Dr. Berman and several other people, and he's been watching every single step, the legal aspects of every single move that has been made, and this thing has been like a chess game that's so confusing. And just the simple things of understanding. We go back to it seems like it was ages ago we were in a 14-day quarantine, right? So now you got to remember, you got to ask yourself, gee whiz, did could we rent cars or not? you know but this guy, he remembers all this stuff because he walks down that legal path. And I think what's definite about it is, they want what is in the best interest of the people of Kauai, and hopefully it'll rub off to the other counties. But as was mentioned, they still don't know why. When I asked a question about how the governor thinks or how he operates some of the decision making process, I know that the lieutenant governor has some influence, because the governor made the lieutenant governor the point person for this whole COVID response. It's been that way from day one. You know, um, I know there was a little shadowing going on where Dr. Bruce Anderson was still head of the Department of Health, along with the state epidemiologist Sarah Park. But as we know from that point, that there was a lot of problems that kind of led to, you could consider it a downfall. But then it was, by the time it was remedied, so many things had happened. But nevertheless, we've got states that are just busting at the seams. And there's so much to be learned from these states. But for some reason, the governor, again, I hate to say this, and maybe I'm being too harsh in judging him, but there's so much information out there of how other states tried certain things and why it wasn't successful. Uh, we know that when other states opened up too fast, what the expansion rate of this virus would be, the spread. And that information is readily available for us to look at and learn from. But the state just doesn't want to go down that path. I'm not saying that we become identical to Washington State or Alaska or California or Utah, but just let us learn from their misfortunes, so it doesn't become our misfortune. And when we don't, then kudos to someone like Mike and Mayor Kawakami and the rest of his team, Dr. Berriman, that they said, you know what? It seems that maybe the thought process is fogged right now, but we got to do something relatively quickly, or we will be in a reactive mode and not in a proactive mode. And that's why they did what they did. That's why they did what they did.
Yeah. I've always said that the state, I mean, it's not what I said, it's just, it's an observation that the state has always been reluctant to test. You know, we talk about our test, we still the one of the lowest states as far as testing per population. It's just the way it is. Now, if we did a mandatory test on visitors, whether it's 3 days or 5 days after arrival, I would prefer five. I would actually prefer seven, but my point is this: if we were to test everyone, I know the governor and the lieutenant governor talks about the cost and availability. We, you know, please put that argument aside because we know that the tests are available. We know this. Why is it so difficult to make the visitor pay for the test? You know, that's crazy. They should pay for the test. But my point is this: if we tested 1,200 or 1,500 people a day on Kauai, as they are after 4 days or 5 days, the state's numbers of cases would jump. That's just the way it is. Not all of them will be sick, but a lot of them will be positive. And that will mess up the state's constant movement to allow tourism to come into the state. They cannot do that. If the numbers are too high, then the state will be forced to take some action and put in restrictions. To me, that's, and maybe that's, I'm the conspiracy theorist, I don't know. But if I look at the trend from day one, remember, Charlie, they were always holding back on the testing. Lieutenant Governor said right out of his mouth that a second test is ridiculous. The one test is enough. See, the more we test, the more numbers we get, the more cases we get. It's harder for the governor to ekomamai the visitors to come to Hawaii. It'll be very hard to convince the public that Hawaii is safe when you see those high numbers. And I think, as I think about why the reluctance, that's the only conclusion I can come to right now is either it's highly personal with the mayor, which I hope not, or it's still part of that same thinking of the state. Let's not test too many because it's going to show the numbers. You know, right now, you know what is one of the things that the lieutenant governor says in every press conference? We're the lowest in the country, we're the lowest in the country, we're the lowest in the country. Right, because we're not testing like the other states are testing. If we tested like the states on the mainland are testing, we would have very high numbers. That's just how it works. So it is what it is. And I hope that the county can muster enough support or convince the governor to at some point consider a 5-day quarantine with a secondary test. That to me would be the balance that would work for our island.
It makes me very, very well, I get the giggles right now. What makes me very, very I should say pondering on how the the lieutenant governor and the governor, how they maneuver is that on one hand, when we talk about vaccines, okay, not to change the subject, but I want to use vaccines as an example. Out of his own mouth, he says that for vaccines to become safe for anyone to take, they must do thousands of tests. They don't take a few, they use thousands of tests so they can make sure they weed out the bad info and they're left with nothing but positive info and what that info shows from the testing, right? So that's why they have the placebo and they have the actual vaccine itself. Okay. In those kind of circumstances, he invites thousands of tests. But when we're talking about testing to see if anybody comes in infected, oh, put on the brakes now. We don't like go that heavy. So I asked myself, why is that? Why does it even go that route? Okay. Remember, I used to always say, "What's good for the goose is good for the gander," and it doesn't seem that way at all when they do things that way. And the other blind side to this whole thing is when they said that, oh, we don't want to inconvenience the traveler, right? Don't put no more burdens on the traveler. Well, remember when airlines started to pop up with all these tests, and I made the comment, gee, somebody must be planting a lot of tests around here and watering them every day because the things is sprouting up like nobody's business. The governor never made any critical condemnation of any of the airlines that was charging between $90 all the way up to $250, right? All they did
Yep.
was, yep, let's put them on the trusted, uh, you know, uh, testing partner list. That's all they did. Not one did they condemn them and said, wait, why are you charging 250 and yet you get on 90-day, right? So when you
Yeah.
look at that, it's saying that, hey, you allowed that to happen. You had no qualms about it. Oh, but when they reach Hawaii, you don't like them pay for another test? I mean, so the question I beg to ask the governor is, Governor, do you care if this disease comes into Hawaii or not? Because by your actions and what direction you want to go, you're telling the layperson, really, you don't care. But you have no problem blaming the residents, every time blaming the local people. You have no problem blaming them for this spread, and yet you don't even know if it's travel related or not. You revert back to the old adage, yep, it's community spread. It's community spread. And if I was in your shoes, I'd do the same damn thing too. So that's what I'm saying. You know, you got to draw the line at some point and say, if the traveler, if there's someone, because when I go to another island and say I go to um, the Prince on the Big Island in Waikoloa, right? I determine how much I going to pay based on what level of comfort I want. I can pay $700 a night for a nice suite, or I can pay $159 for just a standard no frills suite. It's up to me. I make that choice. So I don't know what a governor and all of his ideas, and even for the travel industry, thinking that, oh, we're going to turn off these travelers. Hey, they have a choice. They have a choice. And you know what's really funny in checking with one of the results today, because one of the first resorts that had the resort bubble, I found out, even with what was happening before, some of them come here for 2 months. They never bat an eyelash. They never bat an eyelash. And what was
Mhm.
said today, they don't care. If it was 14 days, I stay here 2 months, so it really doesn't bother me. So I cannot say that it's far and few between, but there are people like that. There are people like that.
Yeah, we do have a lot of people that are part-time owners or part-time residents, snowbirds, whatever you want to call them. So yeah, for them the 14-day, but the traditional traveler, obviously, we will see a definite drop. But I think the two cycles of this virus, the 28 days, or let's just say a month, will give us time to at least settle down the island and as it relates to the virus and see what happens on the other islands. And I know there are some questions I wanted to get to before we go out. The TVR, is TVR still available for staycations? The rule only prohibits renting a TVR to anyone that is subject to quarantine. So you cannot quarantine in a TVR. So this would be a great opportunity for TVRs, legal TVRs, now not the illegal ones, but the legal ones, to open up their properties at a really decent rate for local staycations. Good question. And the other question was a gentleman that is on the mainland needs to get back, purchased or paid for the tests, but is not going to come till after the deadline of December 2nd. Unfortunately, you're not gonna the testing will not be available. The testing option is not available starting December 2nd. So you can either get your refund because the test won't work if you're coming to Kauai, or you can move your flight to the first. If you can move your flight to the first and get your test taken, make sure you get your results before you depart the mainland, you'll be okay. But if you're gonna come on the second or after the second, then your testing is not an option, and I would suggest try to get a refund on your the test if you already paid for it. That's unfortunate, but that's just unfortunately that's the way it is right now. It's a tough decision. It's a tough decision that had to be made, and we just gotta wait and be patient. And understand a lot of people are gonna, if they haven't already, will get the notices that they're not gonna be needed at work for right now. And I feel for every one of them. But uh, as I look at the numbers here, remember the numbers of people that we're tracking are very small numbers, less than 2% of the visitors taking that test, um, and yet they're able to roam around. So we gotta take it serious, because if not, the consequence is deadly, and it can get very very bad. And on Monday, you'll hear from the doctors. You'll hear the questions posed. If you have questions for the doctors, if you have questions for Dr. Capono, Dr. Dara O'Carroll, if you have questions for Dr. Evslin or Dr. Berman, please send it to myself or Charlie, and we'll make sure we get those questions asked. It'll be press conference format, so we will be posing the questions as they come in. We'd like the questions up front. We do want to share the questions with the doctors so they can prepare to answer them. Not like your typical Mel and Charlie show at night. This one is the whole idea for this was to get the information out, give the media an opportunity to ask questions, because these media personnel are speaking with the governor, lieutenant governor, the Senate, the House. So, they'll be able to put forth some good questions for our panel. So Monday at 5 o'clock. And again, we'll go ahead and post that up.
Just by looking at some of the questions, some have asked, what's the difference? Well, the difference is, we brought on Dr. O'Carroll a couple of nights ago to give you a little insight of the comparison used. Okay, we are using data. What he did is he used data along with Dr. Evslin. They used data that was used by the lieutenant governor. And after looking at that data and crunching those numbers, that's where the flaw was found. And so what Dr. Carroll did is he started to do more research and started to target in on the rate of infection when the viral load the was at its was at its peak. Okay. And then what he started to find was that those numbers that were shared by the lieutenant governor of 1 to 2.2 per thousand was actually much, much greater than that. And that's what caused the alarm. And all he was saying is that, hey, he doesn't want anybody to be misled, but we're going to use his data that he received, and we're going to show you why it's flawed, because there were certain numbers that was left out. Okay, there were certain numbers that were left out. So if we applied it correctly, we found firsthand where those numbers were leading, and it was very, very disturbing. That's why we brought him on the show. He did a post on it, ladies and gentlemen. He did a post on it. So this is not a fluke. Again, Mel and Charlie, all we do is we gather the information, we inform and educate. Whether you want to use it or not, it's up to you. Whether you understand it or not, some people out there, like our good friend Brian Ingalls, he loves these numbers. Steve O'Neill, many of you, it helps you understand what we're faced with. So, I hope and pray that, you don't think of us as, again, the word that we've been branded with is fear mongering, because if we're just sharing the info, if you say we're fear mongering, then I guess you don't want us to share the info. Or if you have another way that we can share it without scaring you, then let us know. But the best way you share info is share it straight from the horse's mouth, and you don't alter that damn thing to make it palatable. You don't do that because then we're changing the intent from the author of that info that he's sharing. That's all.
I want to I see a discussion going back and forth about whether or not you need a test to board a plane. No, you don't. You don't need a test. You
No, I
don't.
know where they're getting that from. They're getting that from places like Canada. Okay, they're outside of the U.S. Certain airlines like Air New Zealand, um, Air Canada, WestJet, they're all making them take a test, and they have to have a negative test before they can board a plane. It's been coming out. Yeah, that's what's happening.
Well,
Yeah.
but for Hawaii, you don't take a test, you go to quarantine. That's what it is. If you want to avoid quarantine, I'm not talking about Kauai, I'm talking about, well, prior to December 2nd. If you take a test, if you want to avoid quarantine in the other islands, you take a test, you get a negative test result before you board the plane. If you don't take a test, or if your results are not back in by the time you board the plane, then you have to quarantine for 14 days. So just make that clear. You do not need to take a test to come to Hawaii. It's just that if you don't take a test, you will be forced to go into a 14-day quarantine. All right. I'm gonna make that very clear because it sounds like some people are thinking that if you don't take a test, you cannot get on a plane. No, that's not true. You don't take a test, you don't want to take a test, or if you don't have your results, you'll be subject to the 14-day quarantine. And that's for every island. Starting December 2nd on Kauai, the testing option is not available. So you will, if you come to Kauai, you will be subject to the 14-day quarantine. Uh, so I just want to make that clear. The other thing too, resort bubbles. To qualify for a resort bubble here on Kauai, you have to to participate. The traveler needs to get a negative COVID test. The traveler cannot stay in a bubble resort and be able to roam around outside of their room unless they have a negative COVID test. Okay, I'll make that clear as well. So the bubble, while it's not perfect, and yes, we still talked about, last night we talked about the need to make sure our employees are safe. If you don't have a negative COVID test, you quarantine in your room. To participate in the bubble, get your bracelet or whatever, and be tracked by the hotel, you have to test negative. You have to have a negative COVID test. All right. I know there's a lot of things. A lot of these things have not changed from the last time, but that is one component that we heard the mayor, we heard some of the resort managers that were on our show talk about that you required the bracelet, they put up the geo fences so you cannot go beyond, and you got to have a negative COVID test. Okay. So I understand a lot of people, there's a lot of stress and tension, and we'll try to bring on people to clarify as we go through this period. I just want to say this though. I know there's a lot of negative comments, especially on the county's page. Some really hurtful comments. And I guess my question to you, to any of you that believe that we should not have done the quarantine, what's the option? What's the other option? We heard Mike Dahilig. By the way, Mike is a managing director for the mayor. We heard Mike talk about the mayor's preference, right? Was the test, mandatory quarantine, and a secondary test. Because we cannot get that, what would the other option be? Seriously, what would the other option be? And understanding the way the virus is spreading on Kauai. It's not fair to compare our numbers with Maui or Honolulu. We're focused on Kauai. That's where our concern is.
Well, let's say this, Mel. I think to help you with that and exactly what you're saying. The difference is Kauai has always been transparent when the numbers came out. The numbers that have been given out by the Department of Health on Kauai, the health office, and by the Kauai, the mayor's office, when they release that report, you're going to always notice that numbers are different from what the state got because Kauai has kept on top of it. If every single county did the same thing, then we would have had a better understanding of what was happening statewide. That's why there was a question that always came up. Why is it the Department of Health now for the state is not sharing certain numbers at certain times? We went through this before. Okay. And so that's why it puts everybody on edge. So if we're going to compare, just know this. Kauai has always been transparent. You've always had a report every single day.
Yeah, that's true. It's we're lucky. We're lucky. We live on Kauai. We're lucky. We have our county team, led by the mayor. We're blessed that he's actually doing things, while maybe not popular to some, but something had to be done, and something had to be done before we get to a point that it's too late. I I support it. I know a lot of friends out there that like, yeah, well, blah blah blah, but that's the bottom line. I think giving the choice, I would love to see. Obviously, would love to have seen a quarantine second test protocol. That would have been my preference, as is the mayor's preference. But that was not an opportunity that we had. So what do we do next? And I think we're going to go down the road. I think 28 days. I know a lot of people say, and including myself, we're concerned about the bubbles because we have employees working there. But whether you have a bubble or not, the the employees at the non-bubble hotels, bubble resorts, are subject to the same exposure as the bubble resort. So no, seriously, when I see the comments and I say, but our employees at the bubble resort, well, the same as right now. Our employees at our non-bubble resorts are being exposed to the visitors that are coming to our island. So the issue is not the bubble or non-bubble. The issue is our hotels. And I said this last night, those corporate giants that have the money need to ensure, not the county, not the employee, the employer, the hotel, the Marriotts and the Hyatts and all these corporate giants got to make sure that our employees are safe. Got to make sure that they have PPE. Got to make sure that they get tested regularly. I cannot imagine how we push for testing for the visitors, but we're not pushing to test for the employees every week or every 3 days. That's, to me, that's the solution. And whether you're in a resort bubble or not, if you're in a industry that you're catering to visitors coming from the mainland,
You're a frontline worker.
we need to protect you. And that is where this thing lies. Resort, bubble, non-bubble, doesn't matter. You in front of the visitors, you had a rental car, you at a hotel, you at the front desk, you're at the baggage claim, you're at TSA, you're at the counter at the airport, all of them. You guys are subject to this exposure of this virus. The employer should be the ones, and I don't care, charge the tourists. Charge them the extra $4, $5, $10, $20 COVID fee to cover the expense. But our employees got to be protected. Got to be protected. Thanks for that rant again. I have to.
You know what I would like to see? There's a question about flight attendants, right? Supposedly exempt. Because rapid antigen tests, now some of you may agree or disagree because the low sensitivity, well, I should say the low percentage of accuracy. It's not in the 95 or 98 percentile. It's more like towards the 91 to 90. But still, yet it's better than nothing. Okay. And again, Mel and I, because we're former law enforcement officers, you ask yourself, the best way to tell if someone is a DUI is once you make the arrest, you take them in and you either get a blood test or you get a breathalyzer test, right? Well, lo and behold, to prevent unnecessary. Maybe somebody has some other means why they're driving their vehicle that might be indicative of a DUI driver. So what did they do? They brought onto the scene these portable, they call it a PBT, where you can actually test somebody out on the streets. So what I'm looking at for our flight attendants, why doesn't these companies pick up these rapid antigen tests, right? Why don't they pick them up? And then as soon as they land, they got to take one test and you keep on testing them. If they say that these rapid antigen tests is like between $10 and $15 a pop, use them and keep the data available. Okay. Because what it might tell you is maybe certain routes are more susceptible to the virus than other routes. I mean, you can start up a whole another collection of data to see, what routes are higher probability that people will get infected from just by testing the flight attendants. What's wrong with that?
Yeah.
Just a suggestion.
Just Kike also said, we cannot forget our other frontline grocery store workers,
Yes.
service station workers. I mean, everybody that is subject to contact with not just visitors, too, travelers, and because we know the community spread is happening, we just all got to be careful, and employers got to make sure that their safety protocols are in place to protect their employees. I think that just should go without saying, but sometimes you got to remind people. But anyway, Charles, it is after 8, bro.
Yes,
Any
brother.
any closing comments? Somebody said that UH just scored, so that's cool.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Good to hear. Well, these are my closing comments. Again, I'd just like to say thank you to all of you. You know, you're here with us on a Saturday night. You can't be going out right now. You can't be, congregating with all your friends with no mask. No, I'm only teasing. I'm only teasing. You could have been doing anything, but you decided to stay here with Uncle Mel and Uncle Charlie, and I'm greatly appreciative to you for that thought. Um, and thank you. Um, I know there's a lot of questions. What direction do we go? Please, I know just by looking at the comments, many of you, there's some of you from Kauai, but there's some of you from the Big Island as well as Oahu. Okay, this 14-day quarantine only applies to Kauai. So be not afraid, but it's a decision that our mayor had to make. And what I like to say is that when December 2nd comes along and for 28 days, and then it's going to be reevaluated. But I think it will be a good time that we can do a comparison between Kauai and the rest of the state to see where we're at when it comes to travel and what the results will yield. Okay. Now, more than likely it's going to be lower because people are not going to travel here. But if they do, we want to see how well that really how well that checkpoint does. If we're able to, catch people who are positive or not through that 14-day process. But again, the the health office has always been transparent, and I know they're going to share the numbers. So please, you get a chance, jot these numbers down. They may be important. Then you can do a comparison on your own, and you can see exactly if where your island is going, and if your and if this shows that we were wrong, and all of you were all the other counties is right by not going into an mandatory 14-day quarantine, then so be it. So be it. Lesson learned. But I think we have enough data to show that we were worried about cases just climbing a little too fast for our comfort. And that's why what was done was done. So all I can say is, again, thank you very, very much for listening to us tonight. And thank you to Mike Dahilig for joining us as well. Mel?
Absolutely. I'll echo what you just said. I think we have an opportunity again now. The state has an opportunity because Kauai Again, Mayor Kawakami took the bold action, made the tough decision, to go with the quarantine. Now, if the state has half a brain, they're gonna assign some statisticians to keep track of how many travelers that were heading to Kauai changed their reservations, went to another island. Until the other islands, though, this is the problem, and this is where I'm frustrated with the state, the Department of Health. The governor can direct counties to do whatever he wants them to do. You got to get good data. You got to get good, consistent data throughout the 4 counties. You cannot have Honolulu counting one way, Maui counting one way, Big Island counting one way. Well, Kauai counts it the right way. You count all the positives, you send the positive where it needs to go if it's a mainland positive, but the active cases are kept track of here on Kauai. So we have an accurate count every single day. Every county needs to do that. And then you can do an accurate comparison. You cannot compare apples and oranges. It's meaningless. So until we come across the state with a method of calculating and reporting that's consistent, what's happening is, if you didn't hear Dr. O'Carroll's presentation, or if you got part of it, you didn't listen to the whole thing, and all you're listening to is the lieutenant governor telling us how safe it is, and that we don't have to worry, that our infectious rate of visitors coming in is less than 1 in 1,000, then you would think that the action taken by Mayor Kawakami is extreme and unnecessary. But if you listen to the data the report that was done using accurate data, and when you see the infectious rate of this virus as it relates to travelers coming into Kauai, and how many they are, and that the percentage or the number is actually closer to 15 per 1,000 travelers, then you realize, whoa, this is not extreme, and this is not unnecessary. So, and that's where the disconnect is. You have Kauai, who's reporting everything, being transparent, and then you have the state, who's relying on numbers that are, number one, it's old. They're using the numbers from the Big Island post-arrival test, which is so old already. And that should never count, because that's not surveillance. So until we get that squared away, it's going to be very difficult to do an accurate comparison. But we will see Kauai's numbers drop simply because of quarantine. And I believe we will see the cases in the state increase. So we shall see. We shall see. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, tomorrow night, obviously Sunday we're off, but on Monday, 5 o'clock, please tune in, 5 o'clock, same way, Facebook Live, either my page, Charlie's page, and we'll have the press conference with the media and with Dr. Darrell O'Carroll, Dr. Kapono Chong Hansen, Dr. Lee Evslin, and Dr. Janet Berriman. They will be on the panel, and they will be taking questions from the media and from the public.
And we're going to be in a studio, you and I. Yes.
Yeah, we're going big time, man. We're gonna go to a professional studio and do this one. Hoike has offered their studio to us to make this happen. We wanted to make nice because the media, so it'll we're gonna go early, make sure everything works. But definitely, if you have not heard Dr. O'Carroll's presentation, please tune in. Or you can go to my YouTube channel. Remember, I got a YouTube channel, Mel Raposo. All our episodes are up there. You can see Dr. O'Carroll's one there. It's up 2 or 3 nights ago. Feel free to go check it out. And subscribe. Hit the subscribe button. Yes. And right next to the subscribe button is a little bell. Click the bell so you get notified whenever we upload a new one. So anyway, with that, Charles, thank you so much, buddy.
Thank you too, brother.
Merry Christmas. I see your tree. We'll get our tree up tomorrow. I'll make sure we... not too well. You'll see it on. You'll see it Tuesday night. You'll see it on Tuesday when we get back to our studio here.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. God bless. You guys take care. Stay safe. We love you guys.
Aloha.
Aloha.